As we set up for the next panel, I have a request to all the people running the booths and attending the booths. The sessions are, equally important, and the booth visits can also happen during lunch. In fact, the lunch would be a better time to go and visit them, and now you could, attend the panels. Even if the booths could like maybe go a little more silent, then we could have better concentration here. So that's my request to all the booths, please. And the next panel is very important because the ideas are great, everything looks good, but where is the money? So startups, you need to pay more attention because in this discussion we're going to talk about money. Where is the money coming from? So this is the fundraising in the age of Web 3.0 and Metaverse. Please join me. Welcome Mr. Ajit Khurana. He's the founder of Reflexes. He's going to be joining us online. Dr. Vilma Matina, founder of Fire, who is also joining us online. I would like to welcome on stage Mr. Anirban Chowdhury, Vice President of Premji Invest. Mr. Ankur Chaudhary from Woodstock Funds, and Shaurya Agarwal, founder and CEO of LAM. So on the screen you already see Mr. Ajit Khurana has joined us. We have Ms. Vilma already joined us online. Welcome to all of you. Can we hear it for them, please? They've been kind enough to be here and give us their valuable time. Yeah, over to the panel.
Firstly, I'm very grateful to Naxcom to have us, and also the esteemed panel. The who's who of the Metaverse and the Web3 universe in India. And let's just get started. So Dr. Vilma, you've been in the world of blockchain pretty much before the term Web3 was coined, right? And you've seen the heydays of Bitcoin mining and actually building a unicorn in the Web3 space. So I'm just curious, what has been the approach of investors over this 10, 12-year period that you've seen change, right? There have been different ways investors have looked at Web3 companies, blockchain companies, and Metaverse companies, right? So what has been the change that you've seen over the past decade? If you can talk about that, that'll be super helpful. And also, what helped you raise this $100 million round?
Yes. So the grade of education has been significant. There is a lot of improvement from moving from retail investors to currently banks, Fortune 500s, larger corporations, setting inside of their Web2 investment offices, Web3 portfolio teams, experts in blockchain. A few years ago, 2-3 years ago, they didn't have proprietary teams to just track on the development of blockchain technology. So now I'm talking about JP Morgan, I'm talking about Sony Music, Meta, Microsoft, Sequoia. They first of all set up specific funds for the purpose of Web3, as well as have larger scale educational frameworks inside of the organization to understand, first of all, what is the value of Web3 Metaverse, as well as how expensive the problems are inside of the industry. And the educational level overall has increased tremendously. So has the amount of investments, both in size as well as in numbers. And thirdly, I would say that knowledgeable contribution towards the investments from part of, for example, banks has been increasing. So few years ago, banks did invest. However, they didn't want to be part of the ecosystem or setting up, for example, their office in Metaverse. Now, look at JP Morgan. They are present in Metaverse. So is Standard Chartered. So is Visa. So it's not only passive investment, but also active involvement.
Very interesting. And do you believe there are a lot of challenges as of today raising money in this environment?
Yes,
And open
definitely.
to everyone, right? Mr. Khurana, if you want to come in, feel free. But
So the thing is that until the market turned down with the first interest rate hike for the Federal Reserve, it was extraordinarily easy to fundraise. And the reason for that was because the opportunity to grow, as in most people in this space, and I include myself in that, think that we are looking at 1000x growth of the industry, not any specific player, but of the industry in the next decade. And this decade started 2 years ago. However, with the downturn in the markets, both equity as well as crypto, yes, the last few months have become very difficult to fundraise, and for good reason, right? As in, because people are somewhat pessimistic at this stage, the bottom is still not found. So yeah, you're right. Right now is a little tough, but on the whole, we are in a good time.
fair, I think realistic expectations on valuations could change that. But moving to Ankur, I mean, for all practical purposes, you're a startup too, right? Although you are the most sought after investor in the Web3 ecosystem in India, you also have to raise money from LPs. So the challenges that Shaurya goes, Dr. Vilma has gone through, hopefully not anymore with $100 million in the bank. But I mean, I'm just curious, when you're raising money from LPs, how tough is it, right? And what is the feedback from LPs? Yeah, this is, there's a downturn going on in the crypto world. Why should we put money in a crypto fund? Do you get any feedback of that nature? And also, from your fund thesis perspective, what are the areas within Web3 and Metaverse and whatever else it may be that you're focused on are your core areas you're interested in?
Thanks, Anirban. So yeah, we have been fortunate to be, one of the largest Web3 only VCs to come out of India. And we started investing in 2019. And we have been quite prolific. We have made around 65 investments. We are an early stage investor. So from seed to Series A. But yeah, even then, right, as you rightly mentioned, we are still a startup in a sense, right? So today, obviously, the market downturn is one of the factors that has made it challenging for everyone to raise money. But even apart from that, right, like Web3 is a very emerging space, right? So not a lot of people understand that. So that's like that. Actually, that's the biggest problem, right? And obviously, time will solve that. If you look at how the internet evolved, right now with this level of adoption, we are somewhere in the mid 90s where the internet was. So I think that will take its own time. Apart from that, I think one big thing that could help us is regulatory clarity. So that's the second problem that we face. The regulations are quite fuzzy, but yeah, I think that's also improving over time. And a related third problem is when tokens are involved. Uh, right, in the Web3 world, a lot of investment happens via tokens,
Tokens,
right?
yeah.
So when that is involved, bigger funds and all, they don't have the structures in place to take custody of that token and to actually manage that. Obviously, again, all of these things are improving, becoming better, but yeah, I think it will sort of take its own course.
And our limited partners, um, willing to invest in tokens, like, put their, because at Bloom, right before Premji Invest, I was at Bloom. So the biggest challenges we faced in doing Web3 investments was that there were hardly any LPs that were ready to come into a fund where you're raising in tokens, right? So I'm just curious, is that relatively easier now, considering there'll be a focus on Dubai, US, so on and so forth?
Right. So yeah, I think the appetite for that, especially among Indian LPs, is slightly on the lower side as compared to say Dubai, and definitely, I mean, US is one of the best places where you can raise money from. So that's definitely there. But even that, like over time, as people are, getting more familiar with the space and seeing that okay, it's not just a scam or a rug pull. I think people are getting more comfortable with it, right? And again, as I mentioned earlier, the regulatory clarity is going to go a long way in helping people become more comfortable
Naturally,
with it.
naturally. You know, Shaurya, I just asked Ankur the most compelling spaces in Web3 and the Metaverse. But I've always believed that the Web3 and the Metaverse world are completely different, right? I mean, if you think about it, the Metaverse can exist without Web3, right? Web3 protocols will be used in the Metaverse. There's going to be NFTs used in the Metaverse. But when, investors categorize Metaverse and Web3 in the same bucket, how does it hurt you being a pure metaverse company, especially in this environment? I mean, I think it's temporary. It's all going to change. The Web3 is here to stay. We all know it. But, converging metaverse and Web3, does that affect you in any way?
First of all, thanks for saying that because it was a very recent thing. So one of the US-based investment. Hello. Yeah. So this is very recent. Like I was talking to, there's an inbound from a US-based investment firm, and they were like the first thing they asked was like, we would like to invest against tokens and not equity. And I was like, this is a metaverse company, right? And metaverse and Web3 are not same, and they don't have to be same, and there's no integration needed as such. They are very different, and I think everyone needs to understand that, specifically people who are willing to invest or build companies in the metaverse and Web3 space. So for example, just a quick context on the difference, right? So Web3 is a protocol, and metaverse is the future of internet in literal terms, right? So in the last 25 years, whatever internet we have seen, it's all 2D internet, right? And that's a outcome of the interfacing. So we have seen desktop interfaces, laptop interfaces, smartphone interfaces. All of these interfaces are 2D interfaces, and hence the internet has been completely 2D in the last 30, 35, 40 years, right? In the metaverse, everything is going to be 3D because we will have camera first interfaces, whether it's like AR glasses, virtual headsets, 3D spatial interfaces. And the metaverse is going to be a 3D internet. So essentially, metaverse is the successor of internet, and Web3 is a protocol. So you can build a large metaverse company without worrying about Web3 protocols, and you can implement and integrate Web3 protocols with internet companies as well. So I think there has to be more and more detailed understanding on this device. But yes, we do come across a lot of investors who are like, okay, what chain are you building on? And what's the tokenomics? And then there are a lot of investors who understand metaverse, but most of them are based in the US. And obviously, a lot of them are based in the Middle East ecosystem as well, who understand that metaverse is essentially a lot of innovation on 3D AR, VR development and products out of that. So, yeah.
Very interesting.
And everyone, let me quickly also answer the thesis question that you asked. So we have recently published a very extensive
Quite extensive. I've read that. It's amazing.
Yeah, so I would encourage everyone to take a look. So there, overall, we have identified three mega trends, which we call as convergence, financialization, and virtualization. So convergence is where we believe we have communities, culture, technology, and economies coming together. Right. So this is like crypto being global, bringing down the geographical barriers, and culture and economy coming together. Then we have financialization, where we see DeFi being one of the major things. And there, our thesis is that more regulation will come in and should come in for it to play a larger role. And then on the virtualization side, we have the metaverse and gaming, and where Shaurya rightly said, right, metaverse is not Web3. Like these are two separate things. And this is one of the things that we always ask startups pitching to us. Even metaverse, like if they have a token, we ask them, why do you need a token? Right? Like you can do this without a token. Right? So that's completely true. These are different things. But yeah, as a fund, we tend to because we are a Web3 fund, so we will invest in the intersection of these things. And there we mostly tend to focus on the infrastructure and the tooling
that will help bring brands and consumers onto these various worlds and metaverses that are being built.
Absolutely. There's definitely a convergence that's going to happen. And you rightly pointed out in your thesis. We'll open it up for the audience towards the end, if you don't mind, just 5 minutes. Right, towards the end, last 5-10 minutes, we can open it up. Ajit, I mean, you've been a part of the Indian crypto ecosystem for a while now, and you've also been a part of Sign, an organization I respect a lot because I used to do a lot of deep tech investing at Bloom and done space tech, done robotics, and I've absolutely enjoyed working with some of the science startups, right? But I'm just curious, like, um, what are the other spaces that are going to compete against Web3, especially from a deep tech point of view in this current scenario? Because there are a limited number of moonshots for that any traditional fund can fire, right? Some could be space tech, some could be robotics, autonomy, whatever it may be. But I'm just curious, is Web3 going to compete against other, bleeding edge tech that's being built out of India, especially when it comes to traditional dollars coming from the regular funds who don't have a crypto focused thesis like Woodstock?
So if we were to look at like a little under 30 years of Indian history, and I'm taking India as an example, the same would be true with different time frames in other territories. And we look at some of the industries which have done very well. And just to roughly describe what is very well, let us say the industry grows to 1000x in a decade, such as e-commerce, mobile devices, mobile gaming, payment gateways, social media. These are some of the industries which have had their fabulous decade under the sun, where they went from 1 to 1000. There are some others, such as drones or wearables, which promised to be the 1000x but did not give us a 1000x decade. If we look at our experiences there are three clear trends that emerge. Number one, when an industry grows so rapidly, most individual players in that industry actually die down. That means there is some few of them that emerge that become really large. Number two is that the investor interest, primarily coming from the venture capital and private equity space, initially tends to be in a very spray and pray mode because we don't know anything. But then sooner or later, investors find who is the next Amazon or who is the next Google, who is the next Facebook of a given sector, and then double down on it and actually help that one player get so highly capitalized, probably somebody would even say overcapitalized, that they tend to grow further. And the third, which was in the deep tech aspect, just want to throw in 2 points to help people understand the state where we are in for Web3 or for the Metaverse or for related digital or decentralized apps. An aeroplane, a plane is actually a very complex piece of engineering and actually a marvel of engineering. It allows us to fly. But when we as users engage with the technology, we do precious little other than buy a ticket and go sit in it. Likewise, recently Paytm had an IPO, which was at a certain price, and in its worst, probably the market price became 1/4 of the issue price. This did not stop people from using the Paytm app. So one has to be a little clear between looking at how a paradigm grows from the user's point of view and of how it might go from the industry or the investor's point of view. So what I'm looking at now is that we are seeing three sort of moves happening in this deep tech space, which is causing confusion. And some of which was addressed by Ankur a moment ago. On the one hand, there are traditional VCs who are opportunistically looking at Web3 but don't have the Web3 DNA. It is like I say that why did Walmart allow an Amazon to get created? Why did a state bank or an HDFC bank allow Paytm to get created? They were in very similar spaces. Why did they not do it? Well, it is usually a DNA encoding. So point number one is that there is large amounts of money. In fact, the largest buckets of money that is now entering Web3 is from investors who are not DNA wise very Web3 centric. This is problem number one because both parties are now trying to teach each other. Point number two is that at this point of time, the number of layer ones, for example, Wilma is from Fire, an emerging underlying infrastructure, and so many more. This is unlike how we saw the internet grow, where we all had like one protocol or very limited variation in protocol. So even the roads are not being built. So to figure out who will be the best car becomes a little difficult. And third, because of this entire regulatory issue, which we faced both with internet, e-commerce, social media, but not to the same extent. Like nobody using Twitter or Flipkart ever worried that, hey, by being a user of these platforms, somebody might tomorrow tell me that I have performed a crime. So that is also something new. So these three things: big money not having the DNA, basic infrastructure not being standardized and having standards, and third, the regulatory clarity, I think, is the driver of this deep tech getting adopted at the user level.
No, very interesting. Thanks for your perspective, Ajit. Getting back to you, Dr. Vilma, I mean, what you've achieved in a very short span is incredible, right? Probably you're one of the fastest unicorns created out of India and global unicorns, right? But you're clearly super differentiated. Like the fire chain operates on proof of benefit, the sustainability defined goals, which is in a lot of ways is making the world a better place. So you have clear differentiation. But when I meet a lot of Web3 companies, some of them seem me too, right? Sometimes, more often than not. I wouldn't say sometimes, to be honest. But I'm curious, and I'm sure our audience, especially the founders, would love to know what's your advice in with respect to differentiating yourself when you're pitching to investors, to show clear impact, like which the way Fire did, which is a completely different paradigm in the proof of fire is completely different from anyone than what anyone else is doing. So what's your advice in differentiation?
I would say that find expensive problems. So, for example, I often give the example of why is Coinbase the most valuable company, one of the most valuables, because there's two buttons, buy or sell. They solve the problem of accessibility to the market, and they solve a very expensive problem that everyone has. Therefore, I would say that not creating additional layers like many companies currently are doing, rather reducing the layers and building Web3 first companies to solving the concrete problems of what we have in the Internet of Value. So many times people come and they start looking into Web2 problems, trying to translate them into Web3 and not understanding that the behavior model of customers in Web3 is completely independent of Web2, which means that the thinking process of finding a problem should be coming from the behavior that is now being created in Web3. Therefore, respect differentiation. First of all, in addition to find a expensive problem, one needs to understand very specifically what are the future needs of the clients. And right now, as clients are decentralized, dispersed, I believe that many of the projects have many challenges on understanding the value proposal, because in Web3 the value is a different value that in anywhere else has existed yet. So, of course, transparency, security, as well as traceability are always good business models. However, there is a lot of opportunities still for new asset class, such as, for example, we have seen recently, for example, digital clothes or monetizing assets that weren't monetized before. There is a monetization of domain names in Web3, as well as monetization of files, peer-to-peer transfer of files. So I think it's more about changing behavior as well as reinventing different values, or selling information in a different package, or solving problems that exist in Web3, rather than bringing just insurance or lending to or traditional finance solutions to Web3. And in addition to that, I would say not only to focus in retail market, because there's many unexplored opportunities in Web3 for example, enterprise loaning, enterprise file storing, enterprise software solutions that require decentralization. So it feels like everybody is right now only going B2C. However, B2B as well as C2C are mostly still unexplored.
Very interesting, especially for me, finding the use case has been extremely important when I'm talking to an early stage company, right? And then that clear use case always is helpful. When it comes to talent, where do you think most of the talent is, Dr. Vilma? Especially when you're building an early stage company and growing it at an astronomic rate, the way you have. Finding that talent that's going to stick with you and is going to be through the journey, where do you think, and please chime in, where do you think the talent exists currently?
Well, the biggest challenge in the whole company is to find talent. Eh, I'm always asked, is funding, is building, is no, the biggest challenge is the talent. And finally enough, the best talent currently, at least on our side, comes from India. And if we are talking about geographically, India, I would say Vietnam, US, as well as France, UK, but it's still very difficult in terms of when you are building something new, people always want to take reference of something past. And we aim to educate to not take reference, rather not innovate but disrupt, because innovation has been the innovation just improves slightly existing processes, but disruption changes the behavior. So in terms of finding talent, it's very challenging, not from a skill side, but from the mindset and behavior side.
I 100% agree with Dr. Velma because this is exactly what we are also facing. I mean, it's so early and everything is so new that you have to find people who can think first principles. So the way the interfacing will happen, the way the whole design will happen, everything is like first principle thinking. But she's right, like we are also finding talent from Southeast Asian countries. Like Vietnam is one country where there's a very interesting gaming ecosystem. So if you want to find perception engineers or 3D game artists and 3D designers, we have been able to find talent over there. Even for people who understand Web3 and NFTs, Vietnam is one very good region.
And do you believe the talent is more expensive, which essentially means you've got to raise more from folks like Ankur? I'm just curious. Do you believe the talent is more expensive?
100%, yeah, because it's very rare finding people who are good with perception engineering specifically, and people who understand game engineering and game artists. Even design hires are very hard to find and expensive. Uh, Also, I was like recently talking to someone. Facebook at one point, Meta at one point started hiring almost everyone in the AR VR space, right? So if you want to hire someone in AR VR, Meta has already offered them something. So that makes it even harder to hire talent. Yeah.
Yeah, so I had one more question for you, Shaurya. Um, you know, like Web3 infra is one of the hottest topics that investors want to be in. But when it comes to the metaverse, right? Do you believe that metaverse infra is going to become a standalone investment area, or do you think players like yourself, you've raised a little over $5 million, if I'm not mistaken, will have to go the whole 9 yards and build the infra themselves, because the infra probably doesn't exist as of today for metaverse to work? And what are the infra challenges? And do you think investment is going to go into infra alone, or it's going to be end use case applications like yourself where you have to build the infra and go the whole 9 yards?
No, you're absolutely right. I think there are multiple layers of building the metaverse. So obviously, the topmost layer is the application layer or the experience layer, which we are building. But in order to build that, you need other layers as well. So you need the hardware layer, which is where Facebook is investing insane money, right? When you talk about glasses or Oculus, VR headsets, a lot of companies like Magic Leap and all are investing in the hardware infra. And then there are software infra that is required. Like you need like I can talk about a lot of software challenges that we are also facing, and we have to develop it ground up because there is nothing available out there. And then there are investors who are already heavily investing in the metaverse infra. So A16Z recently invested close to 70 million in avatar creation technology.
Correct.
And it's a very simple. It's not simple, I would say, but it's a very new tech required for the metaverse companies, right? So a lot of investment will happen there. But I think multiple challenges. Like for example, when you render a video, there is a standard way of doing that. So there are streaming technologies that have solved video rendering, right? But in order to render a 3D experience, there there is nothing available to render 3D on native platforms or web. There are no streaming services available. Specifically, if you talk about adaptive streaming, which is like based on the bandwidth, you cannot do that on 3D today. So you have to build all of that from scratch.
Which means more capital needed for a metaverse company, right? Ankur, I'm just going to get back to you. While investing in Web3, I'm just wondering if the approach as an investor needs to be radically different. The way you think about Web3 companies needs to be radically different. So what are those elements that an investor needs to adopt, especially when they're looking at the Web3 world? Because at different stages, there is a playbook for most investors, especially if you're investing in SaaS, deep tech. You try to mitigate the technical risk in deep tech. In SaaS, you're trying to mitigate the GTM risk to a huge extent and the product risk. But I'm just wondering, what are the parameters that matter when you're looking at companies as an investor, especially at different stages, the early stage, the Series A, Series B, across stages, what matters to you?
So I don't think that you have to adopt a radically different approach. And yeah, in absence, because it's a new space, right? So you don't have the same, type of playbooks. In which case, you just go back to the first principles, right? So for example, like the most basic principle, at least the way we look at it is, who needs this, right? What is it, that you're making, you're delivering in a cheaper way, or a faster way, or a better, right? Cheaper, faster, better. That's the basic. Right. So I think if you start from there, it's fundamentally the same. Now, if you talk about the investing across different stages, so again, like we are an early stage investment fund. So there, I mean, you don't have a lot of metrics to go by, right? So the most you can hope for is a good team, working in a large market, right? And with some proof of execution, right?
It's a principle in traditional investing as well. But how does that change when you're doing the Series A, Series B kind of check? What do you measure, right?
Yeah. So like one thing I'll give you an example. So we do sort of we have been the first check as well as post Series A, right? So the importance of metrics increases as you mature. So for example, when we are doing Series A investments, we will look for some sort of PMF, right? That okay, this is what you set out to solve for. You have put this out there. Users are using it. There's retention. There's the standard metrics. So I think as you progress through stages, so for example, you go towards growth stages, Series C onwards, let's say. So I think it just becomes more and more about the metrics, right? Okay, what's the average cost you are acquiring consumers at, what's the CAC to LTV and all. So I would say not very different from what has been what a lot of people have been doing in the Web2 or in general in the investing space. One couple of things that we have seen that we sort of look at differently is in Web3 there's a lot of community and collaboration angle. So we look for founders who can galvanize that community and build that, especially if there is going to be a token involved, right? So that matters a lot. So that's one thing that we have seen different. But yeah, apart from that, I mean, most of the basic stuff remains the same.
Good to know there's not a lot of unlearning needed, right? Good to know that. Ajit, you run Reflexical, right? And you're enabling Web3 companies achieve their full potential. So what's your advice to wannabe Web3 investors on their platform, right? How should they build their platform to drive maximum value for their investee companies and whoever they partner with? What's your advice to wannabe Web3 investors that are coming up?
So, your previous question to Ankur about how is fundamentally investing different, and when he described what he described, you as well as a lot of people in the audience must have noticed that, hey, this sounds exactly like pre-Web3 investing. All the things he listed about pre-seed, etc., because the principles don't change. And then, by the way, he put that last caveat, which was brilliant, about the community. That this is
Very
one thing that
important.
is
Yeah.
different. And strangely enough, my answer is exactly the same. There is fundamentally no difference in the way any organization should fulfill the requirements of all its stakeholders, that is, employees, investors, as well as, most importantly, customers. However, the big difference that is coming in, and again, going back to an earlier comment by Dr. Vilma about how Web3 is presently evolving, is that the focus is typically on the B2C space.
Right.
Not that there aren't other spaces, but in the B2C space. And this B2C in Web3 is not very distinguishable from C2C. Because ultimately, if it were truly decentralized, then B2C and C2C become the same. But because nothing is truly decentralized, yes, there are clear distinctions. So my advice to people who are in the trying to build in the crypto space, in the Web3 space, is technologies which are built on composable blocks over the blockchain. Maybe in the metaverse space also. My recommendation would be the fundamentals of building the team, having a brand, having a product, having good user experience doesn't change ever. It was 200 years ago and will be 200 years later. However, what you have to understand is that marketing, the value of the brand, the value of the positioning has changed. They started changing about 30 years ago with the coming of the internet and the browser, as to how the Generation Z and the Generation X and then the millennials started adopting. I personally think that community is to Web3 what branding was to companies prior to that. This is, of course, a gross oversimplification.
So
Web3
investors
took
need to
places everywhere.
focus on the community a lot, on how they are building their, thought leadership and community. Especially when they're trying to promote the investing companies. Ajit, is that what you're saying?
Actually, that's not what I'm saying, which is very interesting because, for instance, let us take two companies. Let us take Make My Trip, which most people in the audience will understand, a ticket booking, restaurant booking, and a related website. And let us take any Web3 company. Both of them have their own communities. But a Web3 entrepreneur or a Web3 native investor would say that no, Make My Trip has no community. This, despite the fact that so many people use that, despite the fact that you can write reviews and there are online destinations, and somebody would say that from the Web3 point of view, there is no community. The way community has arisen as a concept in Web3 is one level more involved than communities were in pre-Web3. Namely, today, if you go to, like, let's say Cardano as a technology, people who are outside of the Cardano community, which probably is, let's say, 95% of the people in Web3, would say that Cardano is complete nonsense. But you talk to the 5% or 10% of people who are in the Cardano community, they will say the Cardano will be the only thing that remains. Now, this, despite the fact that Cardano has not found too many use cases. So where is this community coming from? Are these a community of users? Are these a community of developers? Are these a community of believers? Right? So what has happened in all of these technologies, Ethereum, Bitcoin, these are, of course, at the token and infrastructure level. You could see similar things happening even at the application level. A section of people have started developing a sense of ownership towards them. For instance, if you look at political parties in India, and I'll obviously not pursue down that rabbit hole too much, today communities of political parties have some higher degree of ownership and affiliation than I perceived, let's say, 20 years ago. So that is what I mean by community, where the audience comes together and thinks we are at the ownership level. We are not participants or consumers, but we are the owners of what is going on.
No, absolutely. I mean, ownership is inherent with absolutely every community in the Web3 world, right? So, I mean, we have 2.5 minutes left, and I think some folks from the audience wanted to ask our panelists some questions. So, yeah, go ahead.
Hi. Hello, panelists. Hello, Mr. Rajiv. Good to see you here. I'm from Blockchain Lawyers, and I just wanted to clarify some aspects of it that needed clarification. One, that Dubai is not the greatest place or the most conducive environment for investment. There are other countries that founders can look into for raising both fiat and non-fiat funds. And two, there was an issue that was brought up, that is deep tech in confusion with respect to regulatory issues. Deep tech founders can definitely look into EU spaces because currently like $47 billion has been laid out to tease out IPOs for deep tech. Because if you see, EU has lesser deep tech than US and China, so they definitely want to lead the race. So it's always about who needs what and which country you're looking at.
Thanks a lot for that. Thank you for your insights. Any questions?
No. Anybody needs clarity can come to me.
I think we have time for one last question.
Hello. My name is Saidul. I'm from Design Singapore. So my question is this. So does do Web2 companies in India have potential to transform to Web3? And what are the challenges for them from Web2 to Web3?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Just to reiterate, the question is, what are the challenges Web2 companies face when they try to move to Web3? So, again, going back to the first principles, like why is that needed? Right. So it will start from there. Let's say there is a legitimate use case for them to move to Web3. And by moving to Web3, like what does it mean? Does it mean adopting decentralization or launching their own token, maybe to bring about a community, right? So it will depend on the use case. I think the primary reason for companies to sort of look at incorporating Web3 instead of just a complete transition, at least from what I have seen, is some sort of community engagement that they want to do. So there, I think the biggest pitfall that I have seen is, again, they put the financial incentives first before actually, looking at why why different users of your product would even want to talk to each other or would want to engage in this, right? So as we sort of joke around that in Web2 projects delivered value first, worried about monetization later. In Web3 it's the reverse. They worry about monetization first. They do monetization first and then think about what is the value they are going to provide. So yeah, I think if you can sort of go back to that and see that, okay, if why should my community exist? Why should my community engage with each other? And as Dr. Ajay was saying, that it's not about just community is not just a bunch of users in the Web2 sense, right? Like there has to be a need for them to engage with each other, like a C2C, right? So I think if you have got the fundamentals sorted, then you can incorporate some Web3 aspects to sort of improve upon that.
Thank you very much for your patience. And Erica, any last word?
I think this is exactly what someone was asking me recently about Web3. So it has to be use case first thinking rather than how to leverage community and then get them more money, right? So more money basically leads to good traction, great traction in the early days, but then it sort of it's saturates, right? So it doesn't make sense. Yeah, it's a use case first approach, basically.
Thank you so much, panel. Thank you. We hope you found that useful. If you did, please join us giving them a nice round of applause for that. Thank you. Thank you joining us online, Mr. Ajit. Thank you, Vilma.
Thank you.
So maybe if you come in the middle, we can still take a nice group picture. This is going to be the most different picture we could ever take of a panel, isn't it? It's very unique. Yeah, a little more piche, like a little, yeah. Perfect. Let's hear it for the panel. So we have some more interesting sessions after lunch. And one thing very important that we'd like to share with you, we're going to keep a scanner available here when you come back from lunch. You can scan that for the report. So, lots happening next, but I think everyone's hungry, so please enjoy lunch. It's at the lawns of the first floor. Please head to the first floor for lunch, and we'll see you back at 2:30. 2:30 we start our next session. Please come